Have you ever felt an inexplicable chill while interacting with someone, as if something unseen, yet deeply unsettling, was unfolding beneath the surface of their smile? Carl Jung, one of history's most brilliant psychologists, uncovered a disturbing pattern over decades of clinical work. He identified a silent signal, far more dangerous than any explicit threat. This signal often slips past our conscious awareness, yet our most primal instincts detect it. It doesn't emerge through aggressive words or openly toxic behavior. It's subtler, and for that reason, infinitely more perilous. Ancient wisdom warned us about these people, but Jung gave scientific voice to what our ancestors only intuited. The most unsettling part? This signal can emanate from individuals who appear completely normal, even charismatic. And when you sense it, the only rational response is to withdraw immediately. Shadow projection is perhaps the most dangerous psychological mechanism Jung ever identified in human relationships. Picture this. You're speaking with someone who suddenly attributes to you thoughts, intentions, or negative traits you've never expressed or exhibited. In that moment, they aren't reacting to you, but to a distorted version of you they've constructed in their own mind. Sound familiar? What you're experiencing is the raw projection of the Jungian shadow. The shadow represents everything we reject within ourselves, the traits we find unacceptable and buried deep in the unconscious. But these parts of us don't vanish. They remain out of sight, gathering force in the depths of the psyche. When someone habitually projects their shadow onto others, they reveal the most dangerous signal Jung observed: a total inability to recognize the disowned parts of themselves. These individuals literally cannot see these elements within. Instead, they see them only in others. The danger? From their perspective, you are truly embodying the very traits they reject in themselves. Spiritual traditions grasped this dynamic long before Jung described it. In Buddhism, it's the darkened mirror that reflects one's own impurities onto the world. Christianity offers the metaphor of the beam in one's own eye, even while condemning the speck in another's. What's most alarming is that the person projecting their shadow fully believes in the truth of their perception. They're not lying. They genuinely see in you what they cannot face in themselves. This distortion breeds a powerful conviction, so persuasive, in fact, that it can sway others. It can make people believe you are exactly as they describe. Modern neuroscience has confirmed Jung's insight. Our brains filter reality to confirm what we already believe. But in cases of massive shadow projection, this filter becomes a full-blown distortion. Researcher Robert Johnson compared it to wearing glasses that alter everything you see. So, how do you recognize when someone is projecting their shadow onto you? The signal reveals itself in the dissonance between their perception and your internal truth. They accuse you of motives you've never had, or emotions you haven't felt, and they do it with total certainty, immune to any evidence to the contrary. What's really happening in that moment? You're witnessing the external eruption of an internal war. They are battling parts of themselves they cannot accept, and you, unwillingly, have become the battlefield. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, says the ancient proverb, but Jung would add, and driven by those who consider themselves unquestionably good. Ego inflation represents an extraordinary danger, precisely because it disguises itself as virtue. When you encounter someone utterly convinced of their moral superiority, their spiritual infallibility, or their possession of absolute truth, you are witnessing what Jung called psychic inflation, perhaps the most alarming sign of all. Unlike simple arrogance, which is easily spotted, Jungian inflation is deeper, subtler, and infinitely more perilous. It occurs when the ego merges with archetypal forces, especially the image of the savior, the enlightened one, or the bearer of ultimate truth. In this state, a person no longer sees themselves as a fallible human being, but as a direct representative of the divine, or even the absolute itself. The German mystic Meister Eckhart warned about this centuries ago, describing it as the most subtle trap on the spiritual path. Zen traditions call it Zen sickness. The Sufis speak of the veil of light, far more dangerous than the veil of darkness, because it is harder to recognize as an obstacle. The unmistakable signal appears when this person never questions their own motives. While the greatest sages throughout history have expressed humility before the mystery of existence, those suffering from psychic inflation exhibit absolute certainty. They do not entertain the possibility of being wrong, because in their minds, they aren't expressing personal opinions, but universal truths. What makes this state especially dangerous is the extraordinary charisma it can produce. Jung noted how individuals with severe psychic inflation often attracted devoted followers, drawn in by the sheer conviction they radiated. This certainty fulfills a deep human craving for security and definitive answers in an uncertain world. Chilean psychologist Claudio Naranjo, a student of spiritual traditions, observed that the spiritual ego is the most refined and the hardest to detect. An ordinary ego says, I am important. An inflated ego says, I am a channel of the supreme good. That subtle difference explains why so many people are drawn to individuals who appear spiritually elevated, but may in truth be dangerously inflated. So, how do you recognize psychic inflation? Observe how someone reacts to criticism or disagreement. The person caught in ego archetype inflation doesn't treat questioning as valuable input. They experience it as a direct assault on the cosmic order they believe they represent. Any opposition isn't viewed as a legitimate human disagreement, but as resistance to the good, the truth, or the divine itself. Jung warned that this state poses a threat not only to others, but above all, to the person who experiences it. When the small ego identifies with transpersonal forces, the psyche is subjected to unbearable tension that demands compensation. The greater the inflation, the more catastrophic the collapse when the disowned aspects inevitably return. What could be more unsettling than someone who shows you exactly what you expect to see, at all times, in all situations? Jung uncovered a disturbing pattern in certain individuals, a kind of social adaptation so flawless that it erases all rough edges, contradictions, and human spontaneity. This impeccable mask, or persona, a term Jung borrowed from the masks of Greek theater, is a subtle but powerful warning sign, and our instincts often sense it long before the conscious mind catches on. Total identification with the persona constitutes an extreme psychological danger because it signals a complete split between the external image and the inner self. The individual has sacrificed their authenticity on the altar of social acceptance, constructing a facade so elaborate that even they have forgotten what lies behind it. As the poet Fernando Pessoa once warned, the danger is not in the mask, but in forgetting that it is a mask. Eastern contemplative traditions have recognized this phenomenon for millennia. In Zen Buddhism, there's a concept called the original face before birth, that essential core of being, which exists beyond all social constructions. Taoist masters cautioned against polishing the surface so obsessively that the substance beneath is worn away. Jung translated these ancient insights into the language of modern psychology, and the warning sign is unmistakable. You begin to sense an eerie artificiality in your interaction with someone. Their behavior may be technically flawless. They know exactly what to say, how to act, which expressions to wear, but it all lacks the unpredictability, the contradictions, and the emotional nuance that define genuine humanity. As Jungian analyst James Hollis observed, excessive perfection in social adaptation often signals a corresponding emptiness in inner life. Contemporary neuroscience has uncovered something remarkable about this dynamic. Our brains contain mirror neurons, sensitive detectors that pick up subtle mismatches between what a person says and how they express it through facial tone, body language, and energy. When someone's social mask is fully detached from their inner reality, these neurons fire a warning signal, which we register as a strange, inexplicable sense of unease or mistrust. But the real danger lies deeper, in what this extreme dissociation conceals. When someone channels all their psychic energy into maintaining a flawless external image, the rejected parts of their personality don't disappear. They gather in the unconscious, coalescing into what Jung called the shadow. And the more rigid the persona, the more chaotic and destructive the shadow will be, when, not if, it emerges. Jung's close collaborator, Marie-Louise von Franz, observed that individuals with seemingly perfect social adaptation often suffer from shadow eruptions, explosive moments where all that repressed energy breaks loose in unpredictable, even dangerous ways. This explains why the people who appear the most put together are sometimes capable of the most shocking and destructive behavior. To fully identify with the persona, in Jung's words, is to commit a betrayal of the self, an abandonment of authentic individuality in favor of a socially accepted illusion. And like all profound betrayals, it eventually exacts a heavy psychological toll. Now imagine this. You're speaking with someone you've known for a while, and suddenly, something shifts. They're still physically present, same face, same voice, but something fundamental has changed. Their gaze, their energy, the very quality of their presence. It's as if something ancient and transpersonal is now looking at you through them. Traditional cultures have long recognized this phenomenon as a form of possession. Jung called it archetypal possession, and he considered it one of the most alarming states a human being can enter. Archetypes, according to Jung, are primordial patterns embedded in the collective human psyche. They shape our perception of reality and can express both light and shadow. When an archetype possesses a person's consciousness, individual identity dissolves. They become a mouthpiece for psychic energies that far exceed their capacity for understanding, let alone integration. Shamanic traditions understood this intimately. Anthropologist Mircea Eliade documented how shamans differentiated between controlled channeling states and dangerous possessions, in which the ego is completely overwhelmed. In Christian mysticism, the practice of discernment of spirits served as a vital tool to distinguish between healing forces and those that could devastate the soul. The warning sign? You'll feel that someone has lost their psychological flexibility, their capacity to flow, to adapt, to reflect. Instead, they've become locked into a single psychic role. It might be the savior, the warrior, the victim, or the infallible judge. The specific archetype matters less than the total identification with it. Telltale signs include a strange intensity in the eyes, a rigid, almost scripted quality to their speech, and the creeping sense that the person in front of you is no longer fully present in the ordinary human sense. As Jungian analyst Robert Moore observed, when a person is overtaken by an archetype, you are no longer relating to a full human being, but to an archetypal fragment that has seized control of consciousness. Modern neuropsychology confirms this unsettling transformation. In altered states of consciousness, brain regions responsible for personal identity show reduced activity, while those linked to transpersonal experience ignite with intensity. While these states can be valuable within ritualized sacred contexts, they become profoundly dangerous when they erupt spontaneously, without psychological preparation or containment. What makes this condition especially alarming is the sense of certainty it produces. Ambiguity vanishes, doubt disappears. In its place arises an absolute conviction, one that radiates persuasive power. Jung noted how religious and political leaders in archetypal possession often catalyzed mass movements, not because of logic or morality, but because of their supernatural certainty, a certainty that made others feel safe, chosen, even blessed. But here lies the greatest danger. Archetypes are primordial polarities. They hold the seeds of both light and shadow. The savior contains the potential for boundless compassion, but also for fanatical destruction. The warrior can protect, but also annihilate. The judge can bring order, but also inflict merciless condemnation. When a person becomes fully identified with an archetype, they will eventually manifest its darkest dimension, and often with no awareness of the contradiction. Jung documented case after case in which individuals, under the grip of archetypal possession, committed acts utterly opposed to their stated values, later rationalizing them or forgetting entirely, as though another had acted through them, because that's precisely what happened. They lost the capacity for self-reflection, and that, Jung believed, is what ultimately defines our humanity. There's a psychological phenomenon even more tragic, more chilling in its implications. It is the moment you realize you are watching someone slowly disappear into their own unconscious patterns. Jung called it the compulsion to repeat. A hidden force drives the individual to recreate the same painful situations, again and again, as if trapped in a labyrinth with invisible walls. And the key difference? This isn't choice. It's not strategy. It's compulsion. This is the moment when you, the observer, feel a rising dread. You realize this person is acting out a psychological drama that does not belong to you. And yet, if you're not careful, you will be pulled into it. What makes this phenomenon truly terrifying is its automatic, unconscious nature. The person is not consciously choosing self-destruction. They are being moved by forces they cannot see, shaped by what psychoanalyst Christopher Bollas called the unthought knowns. Formative experiences so early, so overwhelming, they were never processed by the rational mind, yet they organize all future experience. Spiritual traditions recognize this long before psychology. In early Buddhism, the concept of karma referred not to reward or punishment, but to these very patterns of conditioning, forces that compel us to unconsciously repeat the past. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, The idea of original sin can be interpreted as inherited psychological patterns, a burden passed from one generation to the next, reenacted without conscious awareness. The revealing sign appears when you observe someone who continually finds themselves in the same painful dynamics, different faces, different settings, but always the same script. And perhaps most unsettling of all, they are genuinely surprised each time. To them, it feels like fate, like misfortune, like the world is against them. But in truth, they are the unconscious architect of their own recurring pain. Contemporary neuroscience has found a striking biological parallel. Early emotional experiences, especially traumatic ones, literally carve neural pathways in the brain. These become default routes of thought and feeling, psychic highways of least resistance, and unless interrupted, the mind will follow them again and again, no matter the cost. The brain, shaped by trauma and repetition, begins to form a neurological expectation, a model of reality that unconsciously seeks its own confirmation, even if that reality breeds only suffering. And here's the most dangerous truth. People caught in unconscious repetition, compulsions often attempt, without knowing it, to recruit others into roles within their unresolved psychic drama. As psychoanalyst Donald Kalschit warned, unprocessed trauma demands to be staged. Without realizing it, you may be drawn into a performance, a script written long before you ever enter the stage. Jung noticed a chilling phenomenon. The deeper the unconscious pattern, the more the outer world seems to conspire in its repetition. Meaningful coincidences, what he called synchronicities, begin to cluster around the individual, as if fate itself is reenacting their inner wounds. They don't see it as repetition. They experience it as betrayal, as injustice, as destiny. Each new encounter, each painful collapse, feels unearned, yet follows the same script, again and again. Marie-Louise von Franz captured it perfectly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The most disturbing element is the magnetic pull of it all. Those who are trapped in unconscious repetition emit signals, unspoken invitations, that draw in the very people needed to recreate the original trauma. Jung called this negative synchronicity, the extraordinary capacity of the unconscious to orchestrate encounters that perpetuate its unresolved pain. But if these signals reveal the deepest psychological dangers, Jung also left us with the key to transcend them. That key is the conscious integration of the shadow. This is the dividing line between those who are psychologically dangerous and those who have begun the journey toward wholeness. And the signs of this transformation are unmistakable. It does not look like moral perfection. It looks like a humble reckoning with one's own darkness, an ability to say, without shame or pride, yes, I contain the very same flaws I judge in others. As Jung put it, I would rather be whole than good. Contemplative traditions across history have described this process. Tibetan Buddhists speak of transforming poison into medicine. Western alchemists symbolized it as turning lead into gold. Each points to the same truth, the transmutation of shadow into consciousness. And neuroscience now supports what mystics always knew. Researchers like Daniel Siegel have shown that integrating dissociated parts of the self creates new neural pathways, bridging ancient emotional circuits with the prefrontal cortex, linking impulse to reflection, instinct to awareness. This is what makes shadow work radically transformative. Because when we bring light to the darkest parts of the psyche, we disarm their power to control us. As Jungian analyst Robert Johnson once wrote, "What we deny does not disappear. It simply emerges in forms over which we have less control. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim power, to turn what once threatened to destroy us into creative force. The person who has done this work, even partially, exhibits a rare quality. They see the world in shades of gray. They no longer divide reality into saints and villains. They recognize complexity not out of cynicism, but from compassion, because they've met their own contradictions face to face. As James Hollis put it, psychological maturity begins when we abandon the fantasy of our absolute innocence. True spiritual teachers have always embodied this integration. The Dalai Lama speaks openly of his moments of anger. Teresa of Avila confessed her spiritual dryness. Rumi turned his contradictions into poetry. This radical honesty stands in sharp contrast to those who wear the mask of spiritual or moral perfection, yet remain fractured within. The most reliable sign of someone walking this path? A strange fusion of genuine humility, not self-deprecation, and quiet authority, not dominance. They no longer need to prove themselves, because they've begun to realize there is nothing to prove. As Zen master Shunryu Suzuki wrote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's, there are few." So, before we part ways, have you recognized any of these signals in the people around you? More importantly, have you detected echoes of these patterns within yourself? If this message resonated, comment below. Share what surfaced for you. Consciousness is the first step toward transformation. And if you believe someone in your life is still trapped in the patterns they cannot yet see, share this video with them. Let it be a mirror. Let it be a seed. Subscribe, activate the bell, and return for more explorations into the hidden terrain of the psyche, here in the Jungian universe of Dark Psychotic.